Milovan Milovanović was a Serbian statesman, diplomat, university professor, and a theoretician of state and law. He was born 160 years ago in Belgrade, on February 17, 1863. He was a member of parliament, ambassador of the Kingdom of Serbia to Rome from 1903 to 1907, Minister of Justice, Minister of Finance, Minister of Foreign Affairs in several governments between 1908 and 1912, and the Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Serbia from 1911 until he died on June 18, 1912. Milovanović advocated for a balanced and measured Serbian foreign policy. Thanks most of all to Milovanović's diplomatic activity, Serbia made an alliance with Bulgaria that enabled the creation of the Balkan Alliance against the Ottoman Empire. Although he died at the age of 49, still a young man in full political force, he was with no doubt one of the most important Serbian statesmen and diplomats. Several general principles can be clearly identified in Milovanović's foreign policy activity. They guided him in both presenting his views and his general behavior. These were leniency, flexibility, adaptability, and tolerance. He was known for his efforts to round his views and adapt them to the given situation. His diplomatic skills predestined him for numerous mediating roles. He loved middle-of-the-road solutions and compromises. His political activity was characterized by freedom of maneuvering and the absence of firm attachment to any particular principle. He was not burdened by prejudices or emotions. He distinguished himself as a mediator during the restoration of diplomatic relations with England in 1905 to 1906, after they were seriously damaged following the murder of King Alexander Obrenović during the May Revolution in 1903. A similar thing happened at the Hague Peace Conference in 1907, where Milovanović represented Serbia in a very convincing fashion. A top expert in international law and an agile orator, Milovanović drew the attention of the most prominent lawyers of that era. The friendships he managed to forge during his multilateral diplomatic activity proved to be very useful in his later political and diplomatic career, especially during the tensions with Austria-Hungary caused by the annexation of Bosnia and Herzegovina, 1908 to 1909. Milovanović approached foreign policy in a highly systematic way, which was a complete novelty in Serbian political culture. He defined clearly set goals, which were later to be elaborated and broken down into means to be used to achieve them. He presented the basics of such a rational approach for the first time in 1894, in a discussion entitled Our Foreign Policy. Believing that the main goal of Serbian politics at that time was the preservation of national independence, Milovanović defined the framework for its realization. His later writings only built on the principles that were presented in 1894. Milovanović strongly believed that there are no firm guarantees in relations between states and that everything is in a constant state of flux. Milovanović claimed that Serbia's foreign policy was not an independent and isolated phenomenon. A state cannot define its own goals without first identifying the goals of other interested parties, i.e., neighbors and great powers, as important participants in international relations. He believed that small Balkan states, such as Serbia, must first familiarize themselves with the interests of their powerful neighbors.
The focus of our foreign policy, Vienna and Rome. In relation to us, Austria-Hungary and Italy are two irons placed in the fire. Their interests will prevail, so one or the other will gain the upper hand, or they will have to reach a compromise.
Only then will Serbia be able to begin work to ensure that its interests coincide and overlap with the interests of great powers. According to Milovanović, Serbia had to build its policy into the program of the great powers, to present itself as indispensable. Milovanović's thesis was that small countries would never be able to impose their interests upon the great ones, and that their most important skill was to align their own interests with the politics of the powerful. Serbian interests were to be included and brought under European interests, which is how Serbia would make itself indispensable to the great powers. Milovanović claimed that, by resolving their interests in this way, the great European powers would also resolve the Serbian issue. He applied his theories to the example of Russia and Austria-Hungary as great powers. But he also paid much attention to Bulgaria, as the most important neighbor in the Balkans. Serbia was primarily to take care of its own interests.
We are not, nor do we want to be, a tool of Russia or anyone else.
Milovanović rejected any sentimentality based on Orthodox or Slavic ties. Milovanović also very soberly approached the other powerful entity that had decision-making powers in the Balkans, Austria-Hungary.
Serbia is fully entering the political and economic system of Central Europe, together with the entire eastern half of the Balkan Peninsula and the port of Thessaloniki.
Looking at the current state of affairs, where Austria-Hungary pursued an extremely negative policy towards Serbia, Milovanović believed that this was another situation where Serbia had to behave highly rationally and responsibly. Considering the balance of powers, this dispute could not be resolved by military means. When all of Serbia called for war due to the annexation of Bosnia and Herzegovina by Austria-Hungary, Milovanović chose diplomacy and negotiations. Defending himself against the criticism of the MPs that his policy towards Austria-Hungary and other powers was much too lenient, Milovanović said the following at one of the sessions of the National Assembly:
Gentlemen, the difficulty of the position of the Minister of Foreign Affairs is that he is usually not able to use all the arguments that are available to him to defend himself or his actions. The Minister of Foreign Affairs must be considerate. The Minister of Foreign Affairs must be aware of the fact that his word does not represent just him, but the state as well. Therefore, he must be careful what he says. Gentlemen, I don't believe that any of you really think that I would not know how to belt out a patriotic tirade, that I would not know which heartstrings to pull, and when discussing foreign policy issues to be liked in the Assembly and by the public. But gentlemen, speaking as the Minister of Foreign Affairs, I cannot and must not give in to those beautiful patriotic wishes. Instead, I must remain within the limits and follow the path of cold reason.
Austria-Hungary should not be given a reason for aggression. Instead, Serbia must fulfill its contractual obligations most scrupulously, be correct, be accommodating. In the event of a dispute, entrust everything to the great powers and the European public opinion. Patience played a very important role in Milovanović's understanding of foreign policy, as did winning the favor of the European public opinion. Serbia had to be tied to powerful friends. It is always important to stress the European importance of the Serbian issue, and very important to preserve allies. Reputation and sympathy for Serbia should be among the key assumptions of foreign policy. When it comes to patience, there is a well-known Milovanović's sentence from 1894. For great politics, it is important to be able to wait, and to be able to let go at an appropriate moment. Milovanović rejected fatalism. On the contrary, he believed that the state must devote itself to perseverance, and show initiative and endurance in all areas. Milovanović was much more than a classic French student, of which there were quite a few in Serbia at the time. His affinity for the West, and foreign countries in general, was sincere and comprehensive. He was a highly cultured person who knew European museums and theaters. According to the French ambassador in Vienna, Milovanović was spoken of at the English court as the greatest European among the people of the Balkans. In his political life, he advocated for the democratization of Serbia based on the model of France. As a convinced Democrat and critic of the authoritarian government, he once said,
Like any free Serbian citizen, I'm allowed to think whatever I want about anyone, including His Royal Highness King Milan, His Royal Highness Alexander, and God himself.
With the future of the Balkan Peninsula always on his mind, Milovanović paid special attention to Serbia's neighbors. He saw the development of good neighborly relations in the Balkans as a priority and advocated for Balkan solidarity. He viewed the friction and hatred between Serbia and Bulgaria as pointless, passé, and a problem that could be resolved. He believed that it was possible to eliminate any misunderstanding, reconcile one's ambition, and create a common solid force. Milovanović brought reason and utilitarianism to Serbian politics. Interest, not feelings, is key in politics. On one occasion, near the end of his life, he said the following:
I applied everything I knew and did everything I was able to do. I put all of my mind and heart into my work. The future will tell whether I was successful at it or not. And I'm not at all afraid of its judgment. Even in history of larger and stronger nations, there were moments, gentlemen, when they did not win, when it was not possible for them to win, and when they had to lose.